8-page script, let's do this thing. I have an idea.
You, pal.
Vermont? Can you believe this? Job would be great if it wasn't for the customers.
Hey, try not to any on the way through the parking lot.
Let's turn that into a Disney primetime cartoon. It sounds insane, right? Impossible even. Well, it happened. Back in the year 2000, Kevin Smith and friends made this raunchy and cult classic film into one of the best cartoons ever made, in my opinion. Clerks, the Animated Series. It was witty, edgy, risky, and all the good adjectives that end with Y. The storylines weren't limited to conversations about aimlessness and genitals like the original hour-and-a-half film. They were out there. And when I say out there, I mean there was an episode that essentially just combined the Bad News Bears with The Last Starfighter with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Like, where do you get that from? I first watched the series when I was about 8 years old and my dad had bought the DVD. And granted, it probably wasn't a good decision on my parents' part to let me watch it, but it was life-changing. A gateway drug to Kevin Smith, baby's first Clerks. Notwithstanding how bomb-diggity-bomb this show was and the weird cult following that it's since developed, it wasn't long for this world. Disney ABC, the network that bought them, only commissioned the production of 6 episodes and aired 2 of them before swiftly canceling the series. All of this raises a couple of questions. 1, how did this animated show, based on a controversial indie movie from the 90s, get greenlit in the first place, by Disney no less? And 2, if it was so good, why did it have the lifespan of a field mouse?
Because I guess it is kind of odd that there was once a cartoon, albeit very briefly, based on a flick that wasn't seen by many people. It was a little black and white flick that was known primarily because it was so foul-mouthed. And here we were with a cartoon version of it on primetime TV. How'd that happen, Dave?
Well, that's what we're going to explore in this video. Today we're going to talk about the rise and fall of Clerks the Animated Series and what's kept this show so captivating all these years later. Spoilers, Harvey Weinstein does appear in this story, and as you've probably already guessed, yes, he is the bad guy.
Duh.
Our story starts where most stories about Clerks start, with Kevin Smith. Even though the show came out in 2000, Kevin Smith had aspirations about developing Clerks into an animated series from the year 1995, a year after the original movie came out. His representation at the time helped him shop around the idea a little bit, but nothing really came of it. Smith was told that no adult animation outside of The Simpsons would ever work.
And they were saying, well, the TV animation really only pans out for The Simpsons. It's not really going to work for anything else. The Simpsons is kind of the only primetime cartoon that'll ever happen, so thanks for offering, but no thanks.
That statement seems preposterous from today's vantage point, where adult animation rules everything and everyone. But back then they had a different opinion, even though The Simpsons had been wildly popular since 1989, which was about 6 years at that point. Before we move on, we need to discuss the state of adult animation in 1995. Starting with, of course, The Simpsons, the granddaddy of all adult animated shows. Before The Simpsons, mainstream cartoons were seen as baby or kid stuff, mainly limited to vehicles for advertising toys, especially in the 80s, with things like Transformers, My Little Pony, He-Man, the list goes on. At that point, there were only 2 adult cartoons that had ever existed. Surprisingly, there was the Flintstones in the 70s, and an odd series that only lasted about 2 seasons called Wait Till Your Father Comes Home.
Wait till your father gets home. See what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't very good. My parents apparently remember it fondly, so it has that going for them, but anyway. Despite, or maybe because of the lack of adult cartoons, The Simpsons took the world by storm, and television executives noticed. After 1989, a slew of networks tried recreating the success of The Simpsons. There was Family Dog, created by Brad Bird, who would later go on to make The Iron Giant and The Incredibles, Dr. Katz Professional Therapist, The Critic, Beavis and Butthead, but none of the shows made between 1990 and 1995 were particularly successful. Or if they were, they only hit a niche demographic. That's the context for adult animation in 1995, when Kevin Smith was first trying to pitch the Clerks cartoon. What I'm trying to say here is that the industry wasn't thriving. So Kevin Smith dropped the idea and went on to make Mallrats, Chasing Amy, and Dogma. Within that period, Miramax, who owned the rights to Clerks the movie and any subsequent live-action situational comedy versions, tried getting the Clerks sitcom off the ground without Kevin Smith. The result was a bland piece of garbage, standard for what you'd expect of a corporate 90s spin-off, that didn't make it past the first episode. Fun fact, the guy commissioned to write the pilot was named Richard Day, and later went on to write for Arrested Development when it was good. So he wasn't a total deadbeat, but the project felt passionless and stale. As of the time of recording this video, you can actually watch the pilot on YouTube, but I'm gonna save you some time and spoil it. It's bad. So basically, the idea of converting Clerks into a television show was dead until about 1997, when Smith got a new agent that apparently cared a little bit more about his career development and passion projects. This new agent sent Smith to lunch with one of his other clients named Dave Mendel, a Harvard Lampoon and SNL veteran who was fresh off the heels of writing for a little-known show called Seinfeld. I mean, I've never seen it, but I hear it's great. Getting off me being hilarious.
Newman!
The goal of the lunch was not to revitalize the Clerks cartoon, but to meet and talk to see if they hit it off. That rhymed, didn't mean for it to rhyme, I think it rhymed. Let's just keep going.
But we got put together by our agents.
Yeah, which is actually a silly thing if you think about it, because it sounds so stupid that our agents put us together.
One thing led to another, they bonded over comics and classic movies, and eventually they decided to dust off Clerks the Animated Series, make it better, and pitch it to networks. Now I know what you're thinking. I thought they told them like 2 years prior that adult animation wasn't gonna work. Why are they trying again so soon? Well, in 1997, something magical happened to the adult animation space. Actually, 2 things happened. I'd like to introduce you to King of the Hill and South Park.
I'm going down to South Park, gonna have myself a time.
In that moment, adult animation went from The Simpsons and a bunch of auxiliary shows that would flutter in and out of existence, to having 3 heavy hitters on at the exact same time that would eventually go on to be the longest running animated shows ever. This renewed faith in the adult animation genre encouraged other networks to pursue the field again. If you look at the timeline of adult animation in the 90s, you can see a lull in 98 with a whole crop of new shows springing up between 1999 and 2000, where everyone was just inspired to make or develop or buy their own adult animated show. This is where we get Dilbert, Family Guy, Futurama, Clone High, Samurai Jack, The Brak Show, Undergrads, a whole bunch of others you don't remember. The landscape had changed by the time Smith, Mendel, and Scott Mosier, Smith's producing partner at the time, were going to every conceivable place they could to get Clerks off the ground. HBO, FX, NBC, you name it, they went. And every single place, including what would eventually turn out to be their home and graveyard ABC Disney, said they loved it, thought it was hilarious, but it was either not for them or they had something like it in development. Which is a common thing for networks to say when they're rejecting your pitch. Or so I hear. No one wanted them until they went to UPN or United Paramount Network. Now, you might not have heard of UPN, but they're the network that hosts WWE and developed Buffy the Vampire Slayer, America's Next Top Model, and Dilbert, their new at the time adult animated cartoon based on a newspaper comic strip of the same name. And by the way, Dilbert was also a good show.
Shouldn't you be at work by now in your dehumanizing little cubicle, squatting in quiet desperation?
Then and now, UPN wasn't huge, but they were still a real network, and the development guys there absolutely loved Clerks the Animated Series. So much so that they immediately offered the Smith crew 13 episodes on the air guaranteed, which means UPN would pay Smith, Mendel, and Mosier to come up with a team to produce 13 individual episodes, and 100% of them would run on their channel, which is a great bid. UPN figured it would be a great partner to run alongside their other animated show we just talked about, Dilbert. It was very exciting, everything was looking up Clerks. But then Smith, Mendel, and Mosier got a call saying that ABC wanted them to pitch again, but this time to the big dogs. Michael Eisner, the head of Disney at the time, and Bob Iger, the head of ABC. Which seems cool until you remember that ABC wanted nothing to do with them before. Why in the fididdle-daddle was this big network contacting them again to set up a meeting with the head honchos? Well, apparently, UPN was so excited about their Clerks offer that their president and former Disney executive, Dean Valentine, called up Michael Eisner to boast about the deal, which was probably the wrong move. Because while Disney ABC had turned down Clerks before, now there was blood in the water. In this analogy, Eisner is a big mean shark. Fine, so I don't know what Eisner was thinking. But I'm pretty sure this call set off 2 alarm bells for him. 1, well, ABC is kind of a powerhouse now. In 1997, it ranked last among all the major networks. So if Clerks was special enough for UPN to just throw 13 episodes at them out the gate, then maybe it was something worth considering to prop up their network. And 2, given how much of a jerk I hear Eisner is, I'm sure he thought that taking Clerks would be a great opportunity to screw over a former Disney guy. Smith, Mandel, and Mosier were not planning on taking the ABC meeting. They had already gotten a great deal from UPN and knew that ABC probably wasn't the best fit considering Disney's notoriously stringent censorship. But that's when Harvey Weinstein got involved. For those of you coming in blind here, Weinstein was the head of Miramax at the time and the guy who had originally bought Clerks the film when he saw it at Sundance in 1994. And as many of you know, Disney bought Miramax in 1993. So as Smith and friends were ready to reject the pitch offer, Weinstein pushed them to take the meeting and actually went into it with them, which was odd and basically unheard of for a studio executive to be this invested in a project like this. From that meeting, ABC offered the group 6 episodes not guaranteed to air. If we do the math, you can see that 13 episodes guaranteed on TV is greater than 6 episodes not guaranteed on TV. That equation was not lost on Smith, Mandel, and Mosier, who were still gonna take the UPN offer. But that little Weinstein whine in the back of their head got stronger and stronger. He tried getting them to go with ABC by saying that it was better to be a small fish in a big pond. If they went with ABC, they can keep Clerks in the Miramax family. Essentially, Weinstein pressured them into thinking that they had to take the ABC deal. Bill Campbell, a producer on Clerks the Animated Series and the then head of Miramax Television, one of the production companies responsible for the series, recently went on record saying he told Weinstein that the ABC deal was a huge mistake. And in the end, Weinstein still said, "I hear you, you might be right, but we're part of Disney and that's what we have to do." On top of that, Eisner in that meeting told Smith and Friends in no uncertain terms that UPN would be done in a year. But both Weinstein and Eisner were either uninformed or lying, because UPN is still going strong. And it wasn't until years later when Smith realized or remembered that they didn't have to hand over Clerks the Animated Series to Disney, and that Weinstein couldn't tell them which network to go with. Miramax only owned the rights to the movie and the live-action sitcom versions. But hindsight's 2020, and after a lot of pressure, they eventually rejected UPN and went with ABC. Mandel recently said in an interview with consequenceofsound.net that, "I don't want to blame anyone, but I will definitely say from the Miramax side, there was a lot of pressure. They wanted to, I think, appease their new owners at Disney, and so they were definitely pushing hard on the ABC side of things, as I remember." So now that the deal was made, it was time to make the show. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the production process or give you an in-depth review of the show because I kinda already built it up at the beginning, but I'm going to take a little more time to discuss why it was so great. Unlike other series at the time where you can sense the studio influence and their attempts to pander to their target demographic, Clerks was creatively driven. There was an obvious personality and style weaved through the fibers of every beat and joke. They didn't limit themselves to what they can do in the retail space or in New Jersey where the original film was set. They pitched it as a show about people who watch cartoons, and that essence oozes out of everywhere. They did what they thought was funny.
Holy crap, isn't that Dirty Dancing's Patrick Swayze?
Hey, Patrick. Great horse.
Hey, Randall, I call the horse Ghost like that movie I did.
Gotcha.
And it's not just the humor that made it amazing. It was also brilliantly written. One notable example on that point is the entire second episode written by Paul Dini, the guy who developed the 90s animated Batman series and created the character Harley Quinn. The second episode is part bottle episode, part flashback clip show, where it takes you back to one specific gag from the first episode, and events the audience had never seen before because it was the second episode.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit, you old hag. This is for you.
This isn't a fresh concept now with shows like Community and Rick and Morty having explored the tactic. But back then, it was revolutionary and awe-inspiring, especially since no one still has done it in their second episode. Side note, I know Community and Rick and Morty are both Dan Harmon, and Dan Harmon may have watched Clerks the Animated Series, and that's how we got these references in the shows. Those are just the examples I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are more out there. If you can think of any, please let me know what they are in the comments. A little aside about my favorite joke in the series. There was gonna be this ongoing gag where the mayor and the police chief would always either be going to or coming from a costume party dressed as Mayor McCheese and Big Mac from McDonald's fame, but their zippers would always get stuck, so they'd have to do these public appearances dressed as hamburgers.
I was on my way to a costume party when I got the news of this outbreak, and the zipper on my costume got stuck.
Like the mayor, I too was on my way to a costume party. But interestingly enough, not the same costume party.
In the episode titled, and get this, Leonardo is caught in the grip of an outbreak of Randall's imagination, and Patrick Swayze either does or doesn't work in the new pet store. An episode mimicking the movie Outbreak, which was not topical at the time. A journalist asks the police chief Big Mac,
"Could the virus kill the Grimace?"
You know, the Grimace, that big purple McNugget-looking monster. To that, the police chief says,
"Nothing can kill the Grimace."
And that line has stuck with me for almost 20 years. But the fact that it's just a good line and that it stayed with me for so long is not what makes it fun. What's fun about it is that Kevin Smith and his team, to get any of those McDonald's references in the show, had to appeal to the McDonald's people to allow them to use them. They were perfectly fine with the Big Mac and Mayor McCheese references, but they were a little iffy about that Grimace line, to convince them.
We made the argument of like, but we're saying the Grimace is so powerful that
So
nothing
strong.
can kill the Grimace. The joke works in McDonald's favor. You just have that much power. Your characters are that powerful. And they're like, yeah, all right, run with it.
Extra fun fact, I paid to have this line custom printed on a shirt, as seen here. That's how much of a fangirl I am for this. It's not even a t-shirt, it's a muscle shirt. I don't know what I was trying to show off when I bought it, but I have it now. Moving on. The art style was also incredibly unique from other animated shows. They were heavily inspired by comic books, especially the Clerks comic illustrated by Jim Mafu, where black is used liberally to add dimension and mood to the images. If you look at the characters and locations, you can see a heavy reliance on thick lines, dark spots, and pushing shadows to give it an inky and edgy appearance. Water break. Just a note, this is like an hour, 40 minutes of recording, and I'm on page 5 of this 8-page script. My voice is going, so bear with me.
Oh my god, Bear is driving! How can that be?
But going back to the rise and fall of Clerk's story, they were finding their footing, making creative strides, the higher-ups were supportive. The people in ABC believed in Clerks so much that they gave them a Super Bowl spot in the 2000s Rams vs. Titans game. Yes, I had to look up who played that year, but now I have that information, and you do too. Granted, the ad itself was an embarrassing trailer cut by an executive who didn't get the show, but it was a spot nonetheless.
The one funny thing is I'm not really even sure how we ended up with the spot. It was one of those things where I think in USA Today we said we were getting a spot, but they hadn't said that we were going to get it.
Right.
And then they almost sort of had to give it to us.
Because the USA Today piece.
Exactly.
Everything seemed fantastic, but something happened in between the show being greenlit and everything falling apart. And that thing is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? A trivia show hosted by Regis Philbin. Like I said, when ABC bought Clerks, they were 4th place among the major networks. And as Mendel puts it,
when you're in last place, I think you think about things like, hey, let's air Clerks. That seems interesting.
Right.
And when you're in first place, I don't think you want to air it as much.
When you're in last place, you're willing to make new and unique stuff to claw your way to the top. But when Who Wants to Be a Millionaire premiered August 16th, 1999, ABC skyrocketed from 4th place to 1st place. And when you're in 1st place, you stop caring about making new and interesting things and start caring about recreating that lightning in a bottle and appeasing that fan base. For ABC, that meant losing interest in the animated version of an R-rated 90s movie that they bought when they were at the bottom of the heap. And that is when it went downhill, and ABC started doing everything in their power to sabotage the show. ABC Disney did 3 major things seemingly aimed to screw over the Clerks team. The first thing was notes. Again, Disney has a notoriously strict legal and standards team. Smith & Kind knew that going into their arrangement with ABC. But once Who Wants to Be a Millionaire hit, it got worse.
Welcome to the 3-hour version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Notes flew in left, right, and center, and any other cliche analogy you want to use. It was like the network was trying to discourage anything that might even remotely upset their film and loving audience of older individuals and families.
There were a couple of amazing moments where we'd be on with legal, corporate legal, and they were explaining all the thousands of things we couldn't do. And at some point, in a fit of anger, I think I said, well, why did, if you can't do any of this, why did they buy the show? And I have to give the lawyer a lot of credit. They actually just sort of said, I'm not really sure why.
For example, they forced them to add a title card at the beginning of each episode to inform people that celebrities outside of the show did not endorse it and that it was not suitable for all audiences.
The following television show is entirely fictitious. Any similarity to the history of any person living or dead or any actual events is entirely coincidental and unintentional. Except where specifically noted otherwise in the cast and crew credits, all celebrity voices are impersonated and no celebrities have endorsed any aspect of this show. Is anybody still watching after all that?
Which is not an unprecedented request. South Park had one of those cards back then, and they still do today. But Clerks the Animated Series was not South Park. It was much more tame and younger viewer friendly. I mean, anecdotal evidence here, but I watched it when I was 8, and I, for the most part, turned out fine. So that has to mean something. These additions and changes put the creative team in an uncomfortable position, where implementing these requests put them back considerably in terms of time and money, to the point where it became increasingly difficult to complete their commissioned episodes with their dwindling resources. The second sabotage was ABC's attempts to convince themselves that the show wouldn't work on air through focus testing. Again, focus groups aren't an inherently malicious thing. They're a standard procedure within multiple industries to test a product before it goes out to the public.
So, what did you think? And please keep in mind that your spontaneous comments will affect the jobs of hundreds of people.
A focus group would have been fine, if it was done right. But of course it wasn't. ABC never scheduled a group specifically for Clerks. Instead, they assembled test screenings for a completely different show where the target audience was women over the age of 30. And from there, they tacked on Clerks to get it out of the way. And lo and behold, they hated it. Which is what you would expect from a group of women who were watching a show about a property they were not familiar with, where there was no woman, and where most of the characters are under the age of 30. This negative response from a group that the show was never intended for gave ABC even colder feet about airing it come its already scheduled mid-season spring premiere date. Which is probably why they did the third thing to screw over the series. Change the premiere from spring to summer with no warning. The difference between spring and summer might not seem like a big deal. They're both just seasons that start with S, right?
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
In TV world, when your show premiere means everything. The beginning of the TV season is usually fall. That's when most people stop vacationing, they start working, and they watch TV more at night. Then there's the mid-season premieres. Those can start anywhere between January and March. There's nothing wrong with a mid-season opening. Mid-season premieres usually happen to replace shows that started in the fall, were canceled, and then taken off the primetime roster. But summer season premieres are almost exclusively placeholders for bigger shows when they go on break. The shows that networks tend to choose to premiere in the summer are ones that are most likely not going to get a second season. And that's what happened to Clerks the Animated Series. They went from having hope to being moved to the elephant graveyard of TV. At the time, the only show that had actually made it past their summer premiere was Seinfeld. And we all know what happened there. It turned out well, but it was the only one. But the even bigger punch in the head was that ABC didn't directly tell the Clerks team that this switch was happening. Smith, Mandel, and Mosier read that they were being moved in a trade magazine, only to realize later that the network had secretly called their office at a time when no one was there and left a voicemail with the news. That was the only communication they had about this huge decision. Clerks the Animated Series eventually premiered May 30th, 2000, the same night as Survivor premiered on a different channel.
But this cartoon Clerks is going to air tonight at 9:30. Kevin says it's good. ABC hates it so much they don't even want to do business with them. He don't want to do business with them.
Clerks was set to air at 9:30 p.m., but because the NBA Finals ran late on ABC, it was pushed to 9:50. So even people who tuned in to watch Clerks at the appropriate time were left in the dark about when it would be on. And most people don't want to wait around for a basketball game to end at 9:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night. especially since Kevin Smith fans and basketball fans generally aren't the same people I say with experience.
Hi, I'm Jay.
And I'm Silent Bob.
And I'm Charles Barkley.
What the hell are you doing here?
One station in Minnesota didn't even play the episode. They ran a rerun of Home Improvement, and I'm sure it wasn't even a good one. Combining the storm of bad timing and the lack of advertisement for the show, bar the Super Bowl spot and one small ad that Dave Mendel paid for out of pocket on a movie website, Clerks the Animated Series did not open to strong numbers. And while the general audience internet reviewers may have loved it, the critics were lukewarm.
So there was a bad review in USA Today, a bad review in the Post, and a bad review in the Daily News, and yet you say they don't get it.
Can I tell you something? These reviews make Mallrats look like Citizen Kane.
All right, so you're saying that
These
this
are the
show...
worst reviews I've ever gotten in my life.
All right, so the good news is it's not like you're up against a big basketball game tonight.
No, thank God.
The show aired one more time June 7th, 2000, then was subsequently canceled. Instead of airing the other 4 episodes that were completed and ready to go, ABC scrapped the air schedule altogether and just ran reruns of The Drew Carey Show.
Who do you hate at ABC specifically because of this?
I mean, I don't know who I blame more or who I'm more pissed at. I mean, Michael Eisner and Iger, that's a business decision. And at the end of the day, it's like they run a huge corporation. I'm a fly, if anything, on the wall. But the network the execs kind of ticked me off. There's a guy named Stu Bloomberg and Lloyd Braun that run the network. And they were the guys that loved the show and told us how much they loved the show and gave us that Super Bowl spot. And then apparently Eisner and Iger told them they didn't like the show. And those guys turned around and said, you know what, we don't like it either.
And to add insult to injury, the network didn't even air the episodes in the order they were intended to be watched in. The writers carefully placed jokes and gags throughout the 6 episodes in a way that they got funnier the more you watched the show and the deeper you went.
Why are we walking like this?
But ABC decided to play the 4th episode first. So not only did some of the jokes not make sense without the context of the previous episodes, but the characters and their dynamics weren't set up either because, again, it was the 4th episode. If this was your introduction to Clerks, it would have been so disorienting having been thrown into this world that requires at least a little bit of prior information, but it not giving any to you. That may have explained why critics didn't really care for the show at the time. ABC knew they were going to cancel Clerks before they even ran it. They pushed it to fail without giving it a fair chance, and still decided to kick it in the creative crotch to cement its defeat. This all might sound very bleak, but there is a silver lining to this story. Clerks the Animated Series might not have lived past a couple episodes, but its legacy lives on in the people that worked on it. The series was so inventive because of the fantastic team that brought it to life. But while they had some talented people on the show, not all of them were experts in the television realm, especially not in developing a series from scratch. Clerks acted as a television training ground for many of the people on the team. At least 5 people from Clerks, including writers, directors, and designers, went on to be creatives on Kim Possible, which probably helped make it the witty and wonderful show that it was. Not that live action whatever that was we got recently. 2 of these staff transitions included supervising director Chris Bailey and character designer Steven Silver, which can plainly be seen when comparing the thick lines, swooping curves, sharp angles, and the inviting yet subtle color palettes of Clerks and Kim Possible. But for our main heroes of the story, the creators of Clerks the Animated Series, Dave Mendel continues to work in the television space, writing on Curb Your Enthusiasm and showrunning Veep. Mosier has gone on to produce more Kevin Smith movies, as well as producing, writing, and directing short films, documentaries, and animated films and television shows, like Illumination's The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. Scott Mosier directed that one. And Kevin Smith is still kicking ass at making films, doing podcasts, and running a podcast network. The story of Clerks the Animated Series is tragic, but it's not unique. The entertainment business is riddled with politics, and all too often driven by people with ill intent who are more concerned with their back end as opposed to making anything worth watching, which is painfully obvious when looking at the amount of crap that's managed to make it past 6 episodes and on to double-digit seasons. I'm looking at you, season 18 of ridiculousness. That laugh. will haunt me forever. If anything, Clerks the Animated Series is a cautionary tale, demonstrating the fallacy of high expectations and listening to the wrong advice, all wrapped up in a show that was ahead of its time.
Yeah, that was the idea. It was reach for the brass ring. And folks, I'm here to tell you right now, fuck the brass ring. Get whatever they offer you.
Yeah.
And while it may suck that it didn't last longer than a Jawbreaker, at least it existed, and you can still buy it on DVD if that's your thing. Which it should be, because the commentaries on the DVD are worth the price of the DVD. Honestly, they're amazing. So now that we've explored Clerks the Animated Series, I'm going to try and pander to Kevin Smith. So if you're watching this, Kevin, hi, it's nice to maybe be talking to you. You've been a huge inspiration in all aspects of my life. I recently got my Master's of Science, and your story about following your dreams and making Clerks the movie, not the show, but kind of the show, inspired me to switch fields altogether and pursue a career in film and television. I actually thanked you in the acknowledgement page of my master's thesis manuscript. So if you want to read that, there's a link in the description of this video. I even made my family drive to New Jersey while we were on vacation in Philadelphia back in 2012, exclusively to go to Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. For those of you who don't know, Kevin Smith has a comic book store, and it's called Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. I remember driving there and thinking, oh my gosh, we're gonna arrive after closing, so we called the store and we got Walter, which was very exciting. And when I say Walter, I mean Walter Flanagan. He's one of Kevin Smith's oldest friends who runs the comic book store, was the lead in the AMC show Comic Book Men, and hosts the podcast Tell 'Em Steve Dave. We asked him to keep the store open a little later, and he agreed to do it. We got there before the store closed, but it was very sweet that he would be willing to keep open.
Thank you very much.
It's really nice meeting you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you too.
You gonna do that?
Yes, this one.
So, well, can I get a shot of you and Ariana together if you don't mind?
Sure, want to do it over here?
Yeah, it's a good spot.
You put this shit down.
So, did you grow up with Kevin? Is that or?
I grew up in the same town, but we, not until much later in life did we actually start hanging out, though.
Hello, yeah. When we got to the store and I was chatting with him, I called him the Lon Chaney of the 90s, and apparently that must have opened him up even more because he let us use the forbidden washroom. And some more context for people who don't know, in the Clerks movie commentary, they referred to Walter Flanagan as the Lon Chaney of the 90s because he played so many different roles in the film. He just kept changing his appearance. And Lon Chaney is an older movie star / character actor who is known for how different he looked in every movie because of the extreme costume and makeup changes. He was like an old-timey Johnny Depp, where you can't really tell who he is from movie to movie, unless you get a good eye for it. All of this is leading up to say that, Kevin, I would love the opportunity to interview you for my channel. So if you're watching and you're interested, you can email me at the address below. I tried messaging you on Twitter, but you closed your DMs, which I completely understand. Anyway, it would be an honor, no pressure, just throwing it out there.
Well played, Clerks.
And that is the end of this video where I talk about one of my favorite cartoons and try to appeal to Kevin Smith's soft side. And if we want an update on how long it's taken me to film this, it's been 3 hours. I'm going crazy, I'm dehydrated, but it's done. At this point in the video, I want to thank my patrons Matt David, Patrick, Jessica Lee, and Eric Brown. Thank you guys so much for the support, I really appreciate it. If you also want to support me, you can like this video, subscribe to my channel, and or donate to my Patreon. The link is in the description below. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.